Hey guys, how's everybody doing? We are going to go over the heart and blood vessels. This is heart and blood vessels 1. Let's try to go ahead and get this going. All right, so hang on. Try it again, there we go. Okay. The heart and blood vessels, the cardiovascular system consists of the heart and the blood vessels. Cells of the body are surrounded by interstitial fluid. I will attempt to fit that on here. Interstitial fluid. Hey, I did it. That is used to exchange substances between the blood and the cells. Blood removes waste products from the fluid, and it provides the interstitial fluid with nutrients and oxygen. So the blood both provides nutrients and takes away waste products, is essentially what all of that is saying. Some of the functions, transport. So some of the things that are transported, we've got oxygen that go to the cells for cellular reproduction. Cellular respiration, goodness. And then it removes carbon dioxide and other waste products. It also transports nutrients that are from the digestive tract, digestive system, to other parts of the body, to the cells where it's used for life processes. And it transports hormones as well. Hormones from the various parts of the endocrine system to all the different cells of the body. Okay, provides protection. It transports cells of the immune system, different types of white blood cells. And it also helps to regulate by participating in homeostasis. Of a variety of the body's conditions, including the temperature and our pH balance. Okay. All right. Let's continue. Okay, so look at the blood vessels first. Blood vessels transport blood to and from the tissues of the body, and it travels through vessels in the following order. Let's see if I can get it all. So the heart sends blood to the arteries. The arteries send blood to the arterioles. Arterioles send it to the capillaries. Capillaries send it to venules. Venules go to, put it underneath, veins. And the veins send it back to the heart. So, actually, I'm going to talk about this system and how you can kind of remember it in a minute if you're struggling to kind of keep it in order. But let's go ahead for now. Let's talk about the arteries. So the arteries are going to transport blood away from the heart, right? They get it from the heart and they're going to send it out to the rest of the body. Okay. The arteries contain a thick layer of smooth muscle and also elastic tissue. And the elastic tissue allows the arteries to expand or contract depending on the pressure, okay? Which we'll talk about too in a minute. So what blood has the highest pressure in the arteries. All right, so why? Because if you think about what's happening in the system, right? You've got arteries, and where are they coming directly from? Well, they're coming straight from the heart. And the heart, as we know, isn't just like a sluice gate that's open that just lets stuff run through. It's pumping, and so there's force behind the movement of the blood. And so you have force plus the volume of the blood itself, and that's going to have a lot of pressure moving through the arteries at that point, okay? And then we'll kind of watch how the pressure decreases as we move through the circulatory system. All right, so after we go from the arteries, we go into the next branch, which are arterioles. Arterioles are smaller. There you go. They are, I always kind of in my head think about them as medium-sized. You got the arteries that are big guys. The arterioles are in the middle. Capillaries are tiny, tiny, okay? Like the, what is it? Papa bear, mama bear, baby bear thing. Papa bear's the arteries. Mama bear's the arterioles. Baby bear's the capillaries. Just turned it into a gruesome nighttime story. All right, so arterioles then, smaller branches. Of the arteries. I can spell arteries, okay? They are also lined with smooth muscle, meaning that this is an involuntary system, involuntary process. I don't know why some days this little pad works great. I feel like I can write like a person, and other days it looks like, I don't know, like a monkey's writing for me. Anyway. Okay, so smooth muscle contractions allow arterioles to dilate and constrict. So to increase blood pressures, the arterioles have to constrict, okay, by contracting the smooth muscles. So if we want the pressure to go up, we basically have to decrease the size of the opening through which the blood is being forced, okay? Well, let me finish and I'll give you an example. Okay, and then to decrease the blood pressure, the arterioles have to dilate by relaxing the smooth muscles. Okay. All right, so let's talk about this for a second. Hang on. Hey guys, quiet please. You're used to that by now. All right. So I want you to think about the arteries and the arterioles and the capillaries. I want you to kind of think about them as like a hose, like a garden hose, okay? Think about the water that comes out of your garden hose. What would happen if you had a really big garden hose, like a hose that had a really large circumference to it, okay? And you turn the water on. Think about what that would, like what would the water look like as it was coming out? So you'd probably have water coming out of a much bigger opening than it needed, right? That's kind of like what's happening with your blood pressure. If the arterioles are dilated, right, their circumference is being increased, the blood has a lot more room to flow, like water through a great big garden hose, okay, that's going to make the blood pressure go down because you have the same volume, but you have a different amount of space, a larger amount of space. Conversely, think about what would happen if you put a really small hose that had a really small circumference. What would happen to that water coming out at the end? Same water flow, okay? Well, it'd probably be a lot more powerful. And that's, again, because we're sending the same volume through a much smaller space. So that's essentially what's happening with blood pressure, which is why, you know, if arteries and arterioles get filled up with plaque or something like that because of heart diseases or dietary issues, you're increasing the blood pressure because you're decreasing the size of the artery or the arteriole, because now that artery inside is blocked by something. So we've got the same volume of blood trying to move through a smaller space. Hopefully that kind of makes sense, okay? All right, then we get down to the capillaries, the baby bear. The capillaries are super small, and this is where the exchange of gases and nutrients and wastes actually takes place. Okay, so here comes our epithelium again, continues to haunt us from past chapters. Its simple squamous epithelium makes up the lining of the capillaries. It's like a single cell thick. It's really, really tiny. Single cell wide, single cell thick. In the capillaries, blood pressure is going to be really low. So let's think about some of just the mechanics of why that is. First off, we can't have a really high blood pressure in the arterioles and in the capillaries. We can't have the same pressure that we get in the arteries. Thinking about that is probably, you know, kind of obvious. We would blow out the smaller blood vessels if we had the same pressure moving through them as we did through the larger blood vessels. Well, as the arteries branch off into arterioles, right, you get more arterioles. You've got more arterioles than you do arteries. And then that branches off even more into capillaries. So the volume is being distributed into a bunch of little vessels rather than just through some large main ones. And so as it does that, it lets the pressure decrease, not to abnormal or unhealthy levels, but just to the levels that the smaller and smaller blood vessels can accommodate and can handle. Because again, we'll blow out capillaries if they have high blood pressure. They're only a cell thick, only a cell wide. And so it's got to be low pressure there for them to be able to exchange nutrients. All right, so now let's go into venules. Let me do something real quick. This is kind of on here on your notes, but I just want to give you how I see it in my head. Maybe if I can get this, there we go. So you've got the heart. Let's see if I can remember how I used to draw this. Heart goes to arteries. Arteries go to arterioles. Arterioles go to capillaries, which I'm actually going to write underneath. We're going to come back out the other way. So from capillaries, we're going to go to venules. From venules, we're going to go to veins. And from veins, we go back to the heart. Okay, So this is how I think about it. Heart's at the top, capillaries are at the bottom, like a clock, kind of. So we're going to go from the heart to the big vessels, to the medium vessels, to the tiny tinies. And then we're going to come back up the other way. Because at this point, when we're heading in this direction, the blood is now deoxygenated. And on this side, the blood is oxygenated. Okay. So this has oxygen and nutrients. On this side, it's deoxygenated and it's carrying wastes. Okay. So that's kind of how I think about it. If you think of the heart at being like at 12 o'clock, capillaries being at 6 o'clock, then anything on the other side of 6 o'clock going clockwise, deoxygenated, carrying wastes. And between noon and 6, you've got your arteries that have oxygen and nutrients go to the arterioles. Okay, I don't know if that made sense, but this is kind of, like I said, how I see it. We're going to go heart, big, medium, small, medium, big, heart. Okay, so obviously the capillaries aren't going to turn around and empty into the big veins. They're going to empty into the medium size. They're going to empty into the venules, and then from there to the veins, and then veins back to the heart. Okay, so hopefully if there's any of you out there that see some of this stuff in your head the way that I see it, this might be helpful. All right, let's go back. All right, so venules. This is, again, where capillaries drain. Move this out of the way. And then they join up with each other to become the larger veins. Okay, let's talk about veins. Again, they're going to transport blood back to the heart. Okay. They actually function as a blood reservoir, which is interesting. In other words, how do I put it? A reservoir, is like where you're holding fluid, right? Well, the veins hold a bunch of blood. Back up, it's not exactly back up, but it's just the heart itself isn't holding blood, right? That it's pumping back out. The heart has blood sent to it back from the veins, but the veins actually kind of hold on to a decent amount of that blood as it gets sent back up to the heart. I got so excited talking about it, I threw my fancy pen on the floor. Hang on. I'm back. It felt like a Muppet. It felt like a Kermit. Okay. Although maybe it'd be more Miss Piggy, I'm thinking. Oh, come on, pen, work. There it is. I saved it, brought it back. It was touch and go there for a minute. Okay, function as a blood reservoir. All right, 70% of the blood is held there, again, because the heart's not holding it. So it's being held in the veins. The veins actually have a thin elastic layer. Talk about why in a second. They also have valves to prevent the backflow or backflow of blood. I don't know what I was going to spell there. Let's do backward flow of blood. All right, so let's talk about the elastic layer thing first. We know that arteries have a lot of elasticity. And again, that's because it's getting all of that volume of blood that's being forced into them from the heart. it has to be able to kind of do an expand and contract thing as the blood gets pushed through. Well, veins don't have that. Veins are kind of a drainage system, if you think about it. So they're not handling that same rush and force of blood that the arteries do. They're picking this up from the capillaries on its way back to the heart. Okay, so they're not going to have the need for a thick elastic layer like the arteries do. It's very thin. Backward flow. Okay, so you can see here in these images how these valves in your veins work. Normal flow goes this way, right? But then those valves close off to keep the blood from being able to go back down. Why do veins have valves? Because, again, unlike arteries that have blood being pumped into them, veins don't. It's like this semi-passive, how do I want to put it? There's no pump. There's no pump in your feet pushing the blood back to your heart. Okay. And so the way that blood moves is through a couple of different things, which I think we're going to talk about in this lecture or in the next one. But in order to keep the blood from flowing backwards, it has these valves that will keep it where it's at. And then the next contraction around the veins will push it forward, and then the valves will close again. Otherwise, you'd have backup. What do you call them? Spider veins. Oh my gosh, why can't I think of what they're called? I don't know. You guys know what I'm talking about. Like all of a sudden my mind's just a blank. Anyway, we get like the ruptured veins. People tend to get them in their legs, little spider veins. That can be flushed out with saline solution cosmetically. That's actually caused by leaky valves. So some of the little valves don't close all the way, and so you do get kind of a backflow / buildup. Why can't I think of that word? I don't know. It'll probably come to me like some random moment. All right, so let's go to the heart. The heart consists of cells that are called cardiomyocytes, okay? That's what they're called. Cardiomyocytes are heart cells. And they have some interesting structures called intercalated discs. That's an I right there, if you can't tell, because again, it looks like a monkey's writing this. But these are intercalated discs. They kind of look like stitches holding these different parts of the cardiac tissue together, okay? This is cool because it's also pointing out all the mitochondria that are present. Makes sense, we need a lot. And then also pointing out the cardiac muscle cell, okay? But the intercalated discs are these guys that look kind of like stitches holding stuff together. Again, because they are connecting cardiomyocytes. Okay, so looks like the heart's been stitched together with these. They allow electrical signals to contract, to be relayed from cell to cell pretty much instantaneously so that all of them contract together, right? And we will talk a little bit about that kind of slight delay we have in the heartbeat that actually has to do with valves in the heart that are opening and closing, but the cells of the heart should all be getting the contract signal at the same time, right? Okay. So let's look at the pericardium. The pericardium is a sac or a membrane that surrounds the heart. Okay. The pericardium provides protection for the heart because there's usually a little bit of fluid that's secreted by the pericardium that kind of cushions the heart. So you have the membrane that secretes this fluid, and then you have the heart. So it just adds an extra layer of kind of protection and shock resistance, if you will, for the heart. Its other cool function is actually, I guess it's more the pericardial fluid's other cool function is kind of to reduce friction. So it allows the pericardium to slide over the heart without like rubbing against it because of all the when your heart beats, is what I'm trying to say. As your heart beats, obviously it's going to expand, which is going to push against the pericardium, and over time, you know what friction does, it can rub a hole into it, which would be a bad thing. So the fluid that gets secreted by the pericardium helps to make sure that that doesn't happen. I know from, a medical standpoint, one of the interesting things about the pericardium and pericardial fluid is it can be a source of infection. Can get bacteria in the fluid there that surrounds the heart. A lot of times at autopsies, the pericardial fluid will be sampled in order to determine if there was infection, if sometimes it can give information about the function of the heart itself. So it's actually pretty interesting. Okay, still moving through the heart. This right here. So next we have the septum, and the septum separates the right side of the heart from the left side. Septum separates. Okay, then we have the atria, or the atrium. These are the upper chambers. Atrium is singular, atria is plural. Okay, so they're the upper chambers of the heart, and their job is to pump blood to the ventricles. So they contract first, and both of the atria are going to pump at the same time. So despite the fact that the left and right sides of the heart are separated, they are electrically, if you will, linked together so that they contract at the same time. Okay, and then the ventricles are going to be the lower chambers. And they're going to pump blood to the arteries. And specifically, actually, let me do it like this. When we're talking about the ventricles, the left and right sides each have their own job. In other words, they send the blood to specific parts of the body. Okay, so the left ventricle is going to go to the body. Okay, and then the right ventricle goes to the lungs. Okay, you'll probably be asked questions on the exams, kind of asking, you know, if there's a blood flow issue in the lungs or if blood getting to the lungs, which ventricle is more than likely to blame? You know, well, you have to remember, okay, so the right ventricle goes to the lungs, so the right ventricle might be having issues. So you do need to remember what goes where when it comes to these. Okay, so again, the ventricles contract second. They are also electrically linked to each other so that they contract on both sides at the same time. Okay, now let's look at the atrioventricular valves, or the AV valves. These separate the atrium from the ventricles, hence atrioventricular. Kind of has its name of what it does right there. Okay. So, you know, they say that the heartbeat is like a lub dub, lub dub, lub dub, right? Those are the sounds associated with it. That first one is the sound of the AV valves closing after the blood has been pushed through. Okay. The next sound, that kind of dub sound, comes from the semilunar valves. Okay. And these are going to separate the ventricles from the arteries. Okay, so their closing makes that second beat, the second dub sound for the heartbeat. Okay, coronary arteries, these are going to supply blood to the heart. Okay, that's going to the heart, then it's going to have nutrients and oxygen. Okay, they're narrow for arteries, and if they become clogged, this is what causes a heart attack. Okay, let me switch. Let's go over here and kind of look at some of these structures in the heart. Okay, so this right here, this is the right atrium. Okay, and this is the right ventricle down here. What separates the atria from the ventricles? That's the atrioventricular valve, or the AV valve. So this is the right AV valve. Okay. All right, so then we have our left, so I can fit that, our left atrium, and down here is going to be our left ventricle. And then this little guy here is the left AV valve. Okay. This is a semilunar valve. Let me tell you what I strongly suggest after teaching this course for a couple years. The semilunar valves can be hard to see, which is why you don't see both of them usually at the same time in a diagram or in an image. I would really encourage you to go do a Google image search for these valves independently. So like look up the AV valves in the heart, and then look at images of as many different angles as you can to locate those AV valves. When it comes to the semilunars, same thing. Look those up and you're going to see, well, you'll be able to see how they're positioned and why it's hard sometimes to put them on one image. And look at those from a bunch of different angles too. So you can really familiarize yourself kind of in 3D with the heart, because the diagram is great to give a basic map of where things are, but look up the actual images and look them up from different angles, okay? I guess we finish this page. Okay, I don't really need to draw on this. Talks about a partner activity. We're not going to be doing partner activity, but this is great to review the circulation. Notice that we do have the pulmonary circulation as well as systemic circulation. In other words, remember that it's the right ventricle that sends blood to the lungs. So that's going to be your pulmonary circulation, okay, which is shown here in this top paragraph. Bottom paragraph is going to be from the left ventricle, okay, which is going to go to the body. So if we want to fill this out, you're looking at your atrioventricular, right, and the pulmonary arteries. What are they doing with this one? And then back through the veins. So you can fill this out if you want. If you notice up here, they are numbered. So you've got number 1 is the right ventricle, which is right here. And then number 2 is up here. So these are numbered. You can follow the separate paths between pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. Okay, so this is the diagram I was kind of telling you also is here. And then if you remember just the basic flow, like the clock I drew, this kind of lets you go back through and add the different valves in the part of the circulation. I can warn you too that a lot of times on the exams and quizzes for this, it will ask you where the blood will go next, but it will start someplace random. So like if it says, you know, fill in the steps, where does blood go after reaching the venules? You have to remember venules go to veins, go to heart, okay? And then follow that. Do they ask for 2 or 3? Sometimes they ask for 3 or 4 steps after. Just remember the process and the clock kind of where that goes, and be comfortable enough with the circulation process and direction that you can fill out what comes next, even when they start you in the middle of the circulatory process and they don't start you at the heart. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, so let's look at the electrical component of the heart. Okay. Heartbeat control. So we're going to start. We know this is kind of a review, but we already know that whatever, I'll finish it in black. The atria contract first, and then the ventricles go next. And what really controls this electrical conduction is a specific type of tissue called nodal tissue. And these tissues start electrical signals completely on their own. This is important. It means that there isn't anything else required outside of the heart itself for that electrical pulse to be generated, okay? However, they only make up a tiny percent, like 1% of the heart, because you just need a little bit, just enough to create that impulse. There's 2 nodes. The first one is sinoatrial, the SA node, and this is where that electrical impulse actually originates, okay? Because it's called, because it starts the electrical signal, it's called the pacemaker of the heart. Okay, and this is located in the upper right atrium. which is right up here. Okay, so that one is going to create an impulse that's going to send the message to the atria to both contract at the same time. Then we have the atrioventricular, or the AV node, not to be confused with the AV valves, okay? So the atrioventricular node, its job is to relay the signals down groups called bundle branches and then Purkinje fibers, which causes both ventricles to contract at the same time. Sometimes I think about this as like extension cords. The bundle branches and all these specialized Purkinje fibers, they're like extension cords, because the signal for the ventricles to contract is also located in the atrium, not in the ventricles. So it's here, okay? Hence the extension cord part, because the SA node causes the atria to contract, and it's located in one of the atria. The AV node is also in an atria, but it has to make the ventricles contract. So again, bundle branches, Purkinje fibers, extension cords, and power strips to get that signal from the atria to the ventricles so that they can contract together, the ventricles. Small signal delay between the AV node and the Purkinje fibers. Why is there a delay between atrial contraction and ventricle contraction? This is really quite simple, and it's kind of just a mechanical thing. There has to be time for those ventricles to fill up with blood from the atria. Well, so that blood has to be able to flow through those valves to fill up the ventricles. Okay. Does the nervous system have any influence on the heart? Yes, we have talked about hormones in the blood. The blood carries hormones. So the nervous system works with the circulatory system, and there are some hormones that can make the heart go faster. One of the side effects of the fight or flight syndrome is a racing heart. So let me actually write this in. So the nervous system will send signals, and the endocrine system also with hormones, and hormones can work on more than one system at a time to generate the different responses in the body. I forgot to go over the question of the day at the beginning. Why does the heart keep beating after it's removed? If you think about it for a second, I think you know the answer. It's actually on this page. And it's up here, it's the nodal tissue. So remember that this starts an electrical signal on its own. There isn't anything else in the body that it has to rely on. In other words, it doesn't need the nervous system to help kick it into gear for a signal. It doesn't need hormones. All it needs is this little electrical burst that it puts out to keep the heart beating. So when you first remove a heart from somebody that's very, recently dead, or in the case of a heart transplant, it beats on its own because those, the SA node and the AV node are still sending electrical signals to make the muscles contract. That will stop when there's no more blood and no more oxygen coming back through. Then the tissues die. So it doesn't matter if the impulses are being sent or not, tissues are dead. And eventually all of it shuts down, okay? Pacemaker of the heart with a sinoatrial node. Medicine for a long time now has been able to put in an artificial pacemaker. I won't go into it a whole lot because I don't remember all the specifics, but it seems like there are 2 or 3 different types of pacemakers. And the one that is used is dependent on the type of electrical impulse issue that the patient is having. Okay. All right. That is the end. That is the end of this lecture. And I'll see you soon for the next one.